Hello, welcome to Story Hour with Miss Barbara. This story is about a saint, a lion, and a donkey. And it's from a book by Ursula Synge. And I'd like to dedicate this story to my friend Jaden, who's turning 13 and for whom I painted this picture from a tutorial by Michelle the Painter from Berkshire Paint and Sip. So this story begins in Bethlehem. And I'm sure you've heard of Bethlehem. That is the town where the baby Jesus was born. And this story takes place about 400 years after Jesus died. In this town, a rich widow built a monastery that had a house for men and a house for women, and then some quarters for pilgrims who came to see the holy places in Bethlehem. Now, this is where St. Jerome spent the last 34 years of his life. He was translating the Greek Bible into Latin for the Christians of the Roman era. And as if that wasn't enough for one man to be occupied with, he was also learning Greek. He knew Greek, and he was learning Hebrew and Chaldean, two ancient languages, on top of which he would write letters about subjects that were troubling the Christians in those days. And then, on top of all that, he was running the monastery so smoothly that it seemed to be running itself. So St. Jerome enjoyed work and hated interruptions of any kind. They were unnecessary, he said. If a duty were well explained, there should be no reason to explain it again. And if the day were well planned, then nothing could go amiss. Work was the prime necessity of life, and nothing should impede its flow. Therefore, he was not exactly pleased one morning when some of his monks with whom he was translating a difficult text seemed to have lost their concentration. He spoke sharply and repeated the words he was reciting. "What?" said one, and he dropped his stylus. The others were hastily getting to their feet and looking towards the window. One had already had his leg over the sill. "This is unseemly," said the saint. "I've heard no bell to call anyone from our work, and we still have a page to do. Sit down at once, brothers, and we will continue." "It's a lion," said the one who had dropped his stylus. "And God knows we can't work with a lion in the room." And he too fled through the window, following all the others. "A lion? What nonsense," said St. Jerome. "These youngsters will be distracted by anything." And he took his own pen and began to write where they had left off. And after he had written a sentence or two, he needed to get some more ink. So he got up to go towards the door. And sure enough, there was a lion in the room, a great tawny beast with black mane. "Well, this is extremely vexing," said Brother Jerome with considerable severity in his voice. But I suppose you have not been among us long enough to know that I do not like to be interrupted in my work." The lion opened its wide red mouth and showed its teeth. Well, if you are hungry, go to the kitchen, said St. Jerome. The lion stayed where it stood. Are you deaf? Said the saint, growing angry, and he pushed the beast, which moved aside a little and whimpered, wrinkling its muzzle. And then St. Jerome understood that the lion had not lightly interrupted his studies, but had something urgent to tell him. Very well, he said, tell me, but tell me quickly. Life is short, and I'm a busy man. The lion whimpered again, most sorrowfully, and lifted its paw for St. Jerome to see. So, are you hurt? The lion raised its huge, shaggy head and fixed its golden gaze on Brother Jerome. I see. You would tell me in words, if you could, said the saint. Oh, come, let's see this paw. So he knelt and took the paw in his hands, gently pressing it and watching the lion's face to see where the pressure caused most discomfort. The lion winced. Ah, here it is, said St. Jerome, and he peered closely at the soft, swollen pad. A thorn bedded deep. This will not be removed without pain, my brother, but you must have courage. Then, talking all the while in a most gentle and soothing way, Brother Jerome took a pair of tweezers from his table and set to work. Once or twice the lion growled and pulled his paw back and fixed Brother Jerome with a studied gaze. You must be patient, brother, said the saint. I said it would not be easy. At last he had it. He gave a quick, strong pull and held the thorn aloft. There, good fellow, he said. Now I will wash and dress the wound. Before long the swelling will go down and your paw will be as good as new. And this he did, and then he tried to send the lion away out of doors, but he refused to go. Well, then stay, said the saint, but I must work. Now, when the young monks crept back to see if the fierce visitor had left anything of St. Jerome for Christian burial, they were amazed to see Brother Jerome sitting at his desk, deeply immersed in his work, and the lion at his feet, chin on his bandaged paw, looking as contented as a cat who's had some cream. From that time on, the lion never left St. Jerome's side. When he slept, it lay down by his couch. When he worked, it stayed close to his desk. When he ate, it sat near his stool. And when he walked about the monastery, it followed him as faithful as a shadow. The holy ladies made quite a pet out of it. They combed its mane and spoke soft, foolish words to the lion and even slipped it extra food when they thought St. Jerome was too engrossed in his thoughts to notice. But he did notice, and what he saw disquieted him. You are fast becoming a lazy brute, an idle brute, he told the lion. You do nothing but eat and sleep. Yet every other living thing in this monastery must earn his place. Look, and twining his fingers in the lion's mane, he led him around the monastery, showing him different people and creatures at work. It was indeed a house of industry. In the scriptorium, monks were copying the letters of the blessed apostles. In the chapel, they were chanting prayers. In the kitchen, a cook was preparing a meal with a most fragrant aroma that made the lion's nostrils twitch. A tottering old woman was strewing herbs to sweeten the dormitories. Another was weeding the herb garden. And in the apiary, two figures swathed in nets were busy with a swarm of bees. A chained dog was barking at a ragged beggar. And there, coming from the grain storage, was a cat carrying a rat in its jaws. All except you are occupied, Brother Lion, said Brother Jerome. Do you intend to rest forever on the labor of these good creatures? The lion looked at him as though to say, but what can I do? And truly, thought St. Jerome, a lion has few skills. Once you say that it's brave and fierce and beautiful, well, you've pretty much said it all. St. Jerome sat down on an upturned cask and put his mind to the question. A man who could read Chaldean as easily as Greek, and who could argue points of scholarship in Hebrew, would surely not be defeated in a problem of finding a use for a lion. The sun rose higher. The old woman left the garden and took a broom to sweep. The cook brought her pots to scour out in the sun and to dry them. The cat came back to the granary. A hot and sweating monk came through the gateway, hauling and dragging the bridle of a reluctant donkey. I have it, cried St. Jerome. This donkey of mine has to go to the forest each day for firewood. And each day I have to send a man with her, a man I can ill spare from other work, because the creature must be protected from wolves. Now, if you were to keep the wolves away, Brother Paul might stay at his desk. The lion looked coldly at him and licked the paw that was now quite healed. I know what you are thinking, said Brother Jerome. You wish to tell me that a lion cannot load wood, but that I know. Do take me for a fool. Brother Andreas, who is old and does not see clearly, will be glad to load the donkey, and he will do it very well, although he could not defend her from a sparrow, let alone a wolf. You will look fierce and roar like thunder and defend them both. And so it was arranged. Each day, Brother Andreas, the lion, and the donkey set out for the forest, and each day they returned together. Meanwhile, St. Jerome worked at his translations and his commentaries, and at intervals praised God for sending his donkey such a valuable guardian. All went well. But, as you know, in this world, things are bound to go amiss after a while. You see, Brother Andreas, the lion, and the donkey had developed this very agreeable habit of taking a nap in the afternoon. One would doze and the other would watch, and then another would doze and the other would watch. But one day it just happened that all three fell asleep at the same time. Brother Andreas was the first one to wake, and he noticed that the donkey was gone. Then he noticed the lion sleeping with its tawny belly kind of rising and falling with its breath, and it seemed like it had a very satisfied smile on its face. The lion had eaten the donkey. Brother Andreas was certain of it, and if he had had better eyesight, he may have noticed that there were some footprints around where the donkey had been. But he was too agitated to notice that. When the lion woke up, he knew at once. He saw the prints and he could smell the men who had been there. But Brother Andreas was just frightened to death, and he dragged the lion back to the monastery and told Brother Jerome what had happened. Brother Jerome fixed his gaze on the lion. "How could you? I trusted you." And the lion looked so guilty because he had fallen asleep that it looked like and he was so shamed, it looked like guilt was written all over him. But Brother Andreas had the wrong deed in mind for his guilt. Nevertheless, Brother Jerome decided that the only right thing to do was that the lion would have to take the donkey's place. And so they fitted some panniers, and Brother Andreas loaded the wood in the panniers on the lion's back, and then he hauled them back to the monastery. Now, this was not such a happy arrangement as previously. For one thing, Brother Andreas was frightened to death that the lion would eat him at any moment, and so there were no more naps, and he got irritable from not having his little rests. And poor lion, he just looked so unhappy. He lost the bounce in his step. His head was hanging, his mane got matted, and he never slept with Brother Jerome anymore. He just stayed in the stall where the donkey had been. One Christmas, Brother Jerome went to get the lion and said, "Please join us. It's not Christmas without you." But the lion just hung his head and looked out the window. "Okay," said Brother Jerome. "When you're ready, come and join us." And he went back into the chapel. And so the winter dragged by, and the situation went on in this way. Then one day, Brother Andreas was, in his grumpy way, was talking. "Oh, I hate the spring. All the traders come back, and the marketplace is full, and they're always trampling over everything." And he went on and on. But the lion perked up. Traders coming back. He lifted his head, and now he began to watch eagerly as each caravan went by. First there were the camels with their grand trappings and their riders looking very regal and feeling above everybody else. And then after the camel caravans, there came the mules with their supplies. And last of all came the donkeys. Now the lion was studying each one as it went by. Here was an old donkey with whiskers. Then there were some young jennies going by. And then there was another one that looked very sad. And then he noticed one with a white on his chest and his foot. It was his donkey. The lion gave a deep roar. Everyone started screaming and running in every direction. Brother Andreas cried, "Oh no, he's going to eat them all." And he fell down on his knees and closed his eyes and started praying. The camel drivers drew their scimitars and then thought better of it and ran. Meanwhile, the donkey just kept his eyes fixed on those traders and herded them, went round and round and herded them with the donkey back to the monastery. And then when they got inside, Brother Paul shut the gate. And Brother Jerome came running out to see what was the matter. Oh dear, had the lion now eaten Brother Andreas? How would he ever get anything done? But no, there was the donkey. Oh, and the traders, they were screaming one minute, "This lion has abducted us and we're going to charge you in court." And then when the lion would roar a little bit, they would scream, "Oh, how did we know it was a donkey belonging to a monastery?" Finally, Brother Jerome said, "Let the men go. These foolish men have suffered enough, I think." And Brother Paul wasn't too sure at this generosity on Brother Jerome's part, but he opened the gate and they ran out. Meanwhile, in comes Brother Andreas screaming, "How many has he eaten? Oh my goodness." And Brother Jerome looks at him and says, "He has eaten none. We were wrong to accuse him." And then he put his hand on the lion's head and he said, "How can you ever forgive us? If a man had been treated the way I treated you, he would have left me long ago. But you stayed faithfully, and you are a true Christian." It is a happy morning. There's blossom on the trees, and a merry robin singing. There's a golden flight of bees. There's a single dewdrop clinging like a rainbow to a rose. And the sun is busy shedding little freckles on John's nose. Oh, it is a happy morning. There is joy in everything. Such a good, happy morning. John has simply got to sing. And that's the story of the saint, the lion, and the donkey. I hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for listening.